you are offended by talk of spice and smut in books, please click away. You've been warned. The criteria for which a good book makes is not universal to all genres. Story beats, tropes, pacing, character, plot, elements that exist among all stories told, and yet not all hold the same weight as others from one genre to the next. The pacing of a well-told horror story, for example, may feel different to that of a romance. That's not to say both can't have elements of the other sprinkled throughout the timeline. But at the end of the day, there's a place on the shelf for each novel. And today I'd like to tiptoe over to the romance section all the way in the back, where they keep the filthiest of filth. Today, like every other day for me really, I want to talk about smut. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Neverland Book Club. As you may have gathered from the title of this video and the warning you just heard, today's video is not rated G. Minors, DNI, shoo. Keep scrolling. Alright, now that all the adults are in the room, let's get started. I was discussing smutty novels with some online friends, we'll call them, and came to the realization that not everyone enjoys smut the same way. Not everyone appreciates the layers upon which some authors choose to tell their stories. A popular example would be the critique of Sarah J. Maas's spicy scene towards the end of their third book in the ACOTAR series, when the war cries and the other cries are mixed. I don't remember that bothering me when I read it, but upon discussing it with a friend, I realized, yeah, that could be kind of weird, which made me then reflect on myself for a moment. Am I weird for that not bothering me? Now, we've all been there. As smut readers, we've all had that aha moment, that epiphany when something doesn't bother us and we're left to question everything we've thought about ourselves up until that point. I remember one moment in particular that happened on camera. Not like that. I know our minds are in the gutter today, but no. When I first said daddy out loud here on camera while discussing your dad will do. I'll warn you now, if you are not into the word daddy, oh wow, I didn't like the way I just said that. I also didn't say it out loud when I was reading it. Oh yeah. Then I just said it out loud now and I kind of I didn't hate it, but in my head, even reading it, I never understood it. Then it just clicked. Anyway, a common criticism I've heard amongst those who read and discuss smut, both in person and online, is to stick to the theme. You know, the smut. Just focus on the filth. Don't try and make the story deeper than what it is. We're reading for the spice, not the plot, but I just really couldn't disagree more. Yes, some novels are meant to be just that, and that's okay, but I wouldn't criticize another author for using smut as a way to drive their point forward. And with that, today I'd like to discuss what I'd categorize as well-written smut, okay or moderate smut, and then just poorly written smut. The good, the bad, and the filthy. Let's start with the good. For me, this includes two authors in particular, Sarah Kate and Sierra Simone, the S tier. Now, monster romance and romantasy is all fun and good, but sometimes you want something that's both taboo and real. And that's the sweet spot where I believe these two authors reside and thrive. They're not afraid to get really out there while still staying within the realm of reality we're currently living. Both authors use themes of sexuality and discovery with their characters to tell each story in a way where you actually care about each character. They're not inserts that could be swapped out for one or the other, and there's solid development throughout. The pacing works for each scenario, and they're simply well-crafted stories. For Sarah Kate in particular, I haven't read every book she's written so far, but I intend to. I've completed her Salacious Players Club series and have read a few others, but my favorite book of hers among them all is this one, Madam. Throughout the 6-book series, this one character, Eden St. Clair, aka Madam Kink, is seen here and there. She comes up in conversation throughout the novels and even enhances a few of the spicy scenes. And by the time you get to read her book, she's built this persona around her and you're so excited to get to know her and her story better. She's at first portrayed as this larger-than-life character with a unique voice and mysterious air about her. But then you read her story and realize she's just as much a person as I am reading it. I loved this character, and I think of her often. From the themes of domestic violence she's overcome in her past, to the elements of self-worth and love she finds within the story, seeing her grow not only through this novel but throughout the series was just so much fun. And the thing is, every one of Sarah Kate's characters is like this. So real and so relatable in some way. I remember when I first picked up Praise. I didn't intend on reading more than a chapter before bed. I was more than halfway deep before I realized it was the small hours of the morning and I had to be up and get ready for work soon. But I just couldn't stop smiling. I couldn't put it down. Knowing these characters was more important than sleep to me that night. Each one of these books I devoured so fast I couldn't get enough. And now, a year later, I still think of them. I still recommend them to anyone willing to read them, and I remember the bitter joy I felt to finish one and start the next. These are a must-read for anyone open to smut. I promise you won't be disappointed. I realize I didn't tell you much about what it's about, and that's on purpose. I had no idea what I was getting into that one night, and I'm glad it snuck up on me the way it did. Just sex club. It revolves around a sex club. That's all you need to know. Now let's go to Sierra Simone and her Priest series. I've spoken briefly a few times about the series and how much I enjoyed reading these books. However, Simone's way of storytelling is actually quite different than what I've seen from this genre. First of all, she tends to stick to one POV throughout the novel rather than alternating POVs per chapter, which may be more common. Not only that, she focuses on telling each story from the man's perspective, allowing the reader, mostly female, to be inside the head of the pursuer rather than the common female protagonist. The yearning is unmatched. It's palpable. The desperation of these male characters is just so good. It adds to the delusion, and we see these men written by women in a whole new light. Also, by not having almost any chapters in the female POV, this shrouds their characters in mystery even more. We don't know what they're thinking, if their moral compass is as corrupt as our protagonists, and that just all adds to more of the excitement, in my opinion. Now, speaking of her elements of taboo, Priest obviously speaks for itself on the spectrum of religious taboo. However, that's not all these novels deal with. Religious trauma aside, they also deal with grief, life-altering decisions, and in the novella titled Midnight Mass, great title by the way, reproductive trauma. Now, I hear you. Some might say there's a time and place to dissect these topics, and smut isn't that time or place. But what if it is for some people? Every character I've come across in these novels in particular have come out the other end of the story better than they started because of the people they met and the things they were open-minded enough to experience on the way. And I think that can be reflected in real life in a much more accessible way than other avenues. I'm not sure if any of this makes sense, but I stand by what I said. All right, I've preached enough about the good, pun intended. Now let's move on to the okay. For this category, I'm thinking of the books that made me feel that tingly feeling, you know, that butterflies in the stomach feeling stories that are memorable and fun, but weren't exactly 5-star reads when it comes to smut. The first author that comes to mind, one that frequently treads that line for me between good and great, is Katie Robert. She was my gateway drug. She was one of the first smutty authors I came across where I wanted to read everything else she'd written. She is Your Dad Will Do. She is the Neon Gods series. She is the Deal with the Demon books. She does everything from monsters to vampires to daddies. She does it all and she does it well. That said, I do find some of her characters a bit cookie cutter. One-dimensional, characters with multiple names plugged into different tropes. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing with this genre. It allows the reader to use the broad strokes of a character and paint themselves into their shoes. Sure. Which is good when it comes to porn. I mean smut. But, for example, other than the historical, mythical characters like Hades and Persephone, I can't really remember the names of her more memorable main characters. Whereas if you ask me who the names were in each of the Salacious Player Club novels were, oh, I can give you each of their names, occupations, hobbies, and how they're all related to one another. They're not related to one another, just like how they're friends. See the difference? I think I made my point. Some are related. It's okay. Moving on, we have authors like Ruby Dixon and her very well received, by me and many, Ice Planet Barbarian series. Now, here's an author that's underrated. Someone who can pump out good stories that are so underestimated, most readers go into it with the lowest of expectations and come out of it hungry for more. That's not just my personal experience. Everyone I know who went into this Blue Alien series as a joke is now 20 books deep into the lore. And I get it, but is Dixon a one-hit wonder with this series? These stories are exciting, fun, with a plot full of adventure and romance and questionable courting rituals, but still, suspend your disbelief just enough and you'll find yourself willing to live in a cave on an ice planet just to mate with a 7-foot-tall alien boy with the anatomy of a toy that comes in discreet packaging. They vibrate and everything. Now, let's go down one more tier to our Emily McIntyres and Layla Fays. If you're unfamiliar with those names, I don't blame you. If you do know them, you're my people. Emily McIntyre has made a name for herself with retelling old fairy tales from the perspective of, what if the villain got the girl. I read some of her greatest hits, such as Hooked, Twisted, Wretched, Scarred, Crossed, all of them, all with solid spice. I don't have a favorite. They all kind of blend in my mind as one long story in the same dirty world, but I do appreciate her ability to switch the characters up. She doesn't stick to the roles expected for each character. However, the male and female characters of each story do feel a bit mix and match, as though you could swap them out and there'd be no change. If you're into the classic Disney stories and always wondered if Jafar and Jasmine ever did more than just that one kiss, this series is for you. I lied, actually, I do have a favorite. Crossed. It's Esmeralda and what I assume is supposed to be Frollo. That one was pretty hot. That also does a bit of stalker romance, and it did it pretty well. Okay, so Layla Faye, I came across, love her name by the way. Love the name. Layla, Arabic name, Faye. Who doesn't love the Fae? Layla Faye, I came across while pursuing the virtual aisles of Kindle Unlimited. There are so many good and terrible titles under this umbrella, you can't help but judge everything by its cover. Alright, so again, don't judge me. I ventured into the world of arranged monster marriages and found Layla Faye as one of my favorite authors of this incredibly niche trope. Wed to the Lich, for example, was so sweet and heartwarming, like, it was actually romantic. I didn't expect that. Now, I've read a bunch of these. I go for them towards the end of the month when I'm trying to just read something quick and easy in a day to get that book count up, and it's never failed me yet. And from this group of authors all writing tales from this one series, Faye is the most well-written, in my opinion. Her characters, despite being literally anything but human, feel so human. I didn't expect to find a lich hot, but now I do, and I don't care who knows it. All right, now, last on my list of okay smut, I have written in my notes the woman who wrote the door one. Vera Valentine. This woman, I can't be mad at her. She found something special and made it so memorable. We all know exactly what you mean when you say the one with the door. Unhinged, perhaps the best title for a book of this nature, was such an unexpectedly interesting read. I can't help but hate to love it. The originality alone is noteworthy. I applaud Emily McIntyre for her retelling, but at the end of the day, this door smut is an original story. Well, actually, now that I think of it, it's almost kind of like Princess and the Frog type of tale, but still, it's not an animal. It's a sentient door. I mean, come on. Okay, now for the terrible. And I mean bad. Bad characters, bad plot, bad writing, bad spice, just bad. This is my least favorite thing to bring up, but we must complete the list. Okay, so the first name that comes to mind is honestly Jennifer L. Armentrout, the author of From Blood and Ash. I just really despised that book, but I'll give her a break. She did write a successful fantasy series that has a pretty good fan base, but I stand by what I've said in the past. Granted, I only read 2 of her books, but honestly, 2 was enough. I don't see myself picking up anything else from Armentrout anytime soon for any reason, no matter how much it's hyped on TikTok. But if you know of one, please let me know. Next is a writer by the name of Jenica Snow. Now, Dear Jenica is perhaps the very first smut author I read with The Beast. And I am still trying to just scrape the mental imagery from my mind. You know what? I put her on the poor list because not only was that book disturbing in all the wrong ways, it didn't make me want to keep reading smut. See, Katie Robert did that for me with Your Dad Will Do. There is a sense of cheapness with these ones. She does have a retelling series similar to that of Emily McIntyre, but I'd say Emily wore it better. In addition to The Beast, I read her take on Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and I don't know, it's simply didn't do it for me. It's books that make me realize the difference between well and poor written smut, how that can truly make or break the experience for me. Now, I'm about to get even more crass for a moment here, but bear with me. Okay, you know how the amateur stuff is sometimes more enjoyable to watch than the really well-lit studio stuff? You know what I'm talking about. Sometimes the real couple stuff, being creative in their own way, is more believable than the scripted lights, camera, action stuff, right? Well, that does not exactly translate to books. The amateur stuff is not always best. We need better lighting. We need a good DP. We need a well-written script to help bring the characters to life in our heads. I need to care about the characters so I can care about when they come. Now, I could probably talk for days on end listing the bad smut, but I won't name any more names. Despite Miss Snow being on my poor list, I'm not going to lie and say I'd be against reading more of what she's written, because that's the thing about smut. It almost doesn't matter how bad it is as long as you're having fun. And that, my friends, is the point of this video. I think. I'm still not sure. Okay, I know I say this all the time in my videos. Tell me what y'all are reading. Give me your recommendations, blah, 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 but I really mean it. Comment below some of your top tier smutty authors, and some you wouldn't read again. I want to know the good and the bad. Tell me, tell me, tell me. All right, that's all I have for you today. Dear viewers, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you're not. If today's video wasn't to your liking, subscribe anyway. I don't always talk about smut. It does come up a lot, but not every video. I promise. All right, I'm off to go refresh the comments of this video and see what my next smutty read will be. Make them good. Stay lost, keep reading, dirty boys and girls.